Hi, everyone. This is Jason Key at SB Grid, Harvard Medical School in Boston. Thanks for joining today. It's my pleasure to introduce José-Jesús Fernéndez, who's joining us from the CSIC in Spain, in Madrid, the Spanish National Research Council. So, Jose, thank you for joining us. Jose is going to be telling us today about TomoAlign, which looks to be an international effort from Jose's group, but also with contributions from MRC and also UCSF. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Great. So whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, thank you very much for your kind invitation and this opportunity to present TomoAlign. And the development of TomoAlign has been possible thanks to the collaboration with Samlia David Agar from UCSF, Tamay Barat Shorshers, and Richard Hanson from the LMB. Well, let's start. Beam-induced sample motion is a major resolution limiting factor in cryo-EM. This motion is caused by the deformation of the sample under the electron beam, which becomes dumb. And what we can see at the image plane are projection of this deformation and are a complex pattern of motion. This motion blurs the images and kills the high resolution information. The new cameras based on direct electron detectors allows us to capture this motion by recording movies, and by aligning the frames of the movies, we restore the high resolution information. In cryotomography, this motion correction is applied individually within each tilt. So at each tilt, a movie is taken, we align the movies and the frames, and we restore the high resolution information at each tilt individually. However, the deformation that the sample may undergo from one tilt to the other is not yet fully considered. And as the standard tomography reconstruction method still assume, or in general assume, that the sample remains intact during tilt series acquisition. However, we now know that the sample is deforming progressively as the data acquisition is progressing. So using the standard methods translates into local misalignment and deterioration of the tomogram quality, as sometimes is observed around the gold particles, and ultimately in loss of resolution. So TomoAlign tries to address this problem and tries to improve or restore the quality of the tomogram. By considering the motion, sample motion during tilt series alignment and reconstruction. This is the general workflow in TomoAlign. There are several others, but this is the most general, and today I will focus on it. The idea is, as the first step, we use the standard alignment, where it's assumed the sample remains intact, and then with TomoAlign, we model the sample motion with several strategies that we'll cover later. And with the model, we then correct the motion simultaneously with the tomographic reconstruction, or in some cases, we can correct the motion at the image level by warping the tilt series, which allows us to use a standard tomographic reconstruction method. So we will cover this in the next few minutes. But now, as an introduction, TomoAlign is composed of command line programs. Unix style is compatible with iMod. The image format is MRC, and there are binaries for Linux and Macs. And there are a couple of publications that describe in detail the different methods and present some assessment. The packaging and the documentation can be downloaded at this link. And now, let's proceed with the standard alignment, which is in cryotomography is normally based on fiducial markers, and the relationship between the 3D coordinates of the fiducial markers in the sample and the projection in the images are given by this standard projection model, which reads the fiducials are projected according to an overall projection matrix M for each image, which encodes the basic image parameters, magnification, rotation, and tilt angle. And it is shifted with respect to a reference center, and this gives us the expected position according to the model. The alignment then tries to, is formulated as a nonlinear least square optimization and tries to determine the 3D coordinates of the 3D coordinates of the fiducial and the image parameters so that this function, which is an error function, is minimized. This is the sum of the square residual, where the residual is the difference between the expected projected position according to the standard projection model and the experimental one. So in short, we try to determine the fiducial coordinates and the basic image parameters by that best fits the experimental positions of the fiducial in the images. Okay, so we normally carry out this step with iMod, which is the standard method, the standard package, very robust, and it uses the original stack and the row tilt angles as the input, and at some intermediate step, the fiducial are picked either manually, automatically, or semi-automatically, and then with this fiducial, the final alignment is carried out, and we obtain the aligned stack, refined tilt angles, and some additional auxiliary files. To connect iMod with TomoAlign, or to import the iMod alignment in TomoAlign, we need to do an intermediate step. And we need to know that TomoAlign estimates the sample motion on the tilt series used for tomographic reconstruction. So if we are going to use the aligned stack, we need the fiducial to be referred to this aligned stack. But the fiducial coming from iMod refer to an intermediate stack, which is the pre-aligned stack. So there is a small step here, which is the transformation of the fiducial model from the pre-aligned stack to the aligned stack, and this is carried out with this command that is described in detail in the documentation. So with this small step, we now have the fiducial referring to the aligned stack, and now we can proceed. First of all, we could reproduce the iMod alignment with TomoAlign. Just with the program TomoAlign, we introduce the tilt angles from iMod, the fiducial after transformation, and we now, as an output, we have the standard alignment in convention of TomoAlign, and in the output or a log file, we have a report of the alignment parameters, fiducial coordinates, and the residual, all matching the iMod alignment. So now we have the standard alignment that can be input in TomoAlign. Now we are in conditions to model the sample motion. To introduce the sample deformation in the tilt series alignment, we extended the projection model, the standard projection model, by introducing this term. These terms are three polynomials that represent the motion undergone by the sample in any point in the three directions, x, y, and z. And we have three of these polynomials per tilt, taking into account that the deformation may be different from one tilt to the other. These polynomials are quadratic to resemble the sample dome. And here we have two options. For thin samples, it's likely that we can ignore the variation of the motion from top to bottom because they are thin samples. So in this case, we could perhaps use by varied polynomials, depending only on x and y. However, for thick samples, it is likely that the variation of the motion from top to the bottom of the sample may be significant, and here we need trivariate polynomials depending on x, y, and z. And this decision has an impact in the number of parameters. Another thing is this formula can be worked out further by extracting this term. And this, and here in this expression, we are modeling the motion with only two polynomials instead of three. Two polynomials that represent the motion undergone by the sample, but that is observed at the image plane. So this is the motion, this is the same as here, but this only the motion observed at the image plane. So these are two equivalent, alternative but equivalent ways to model the motion, either with 3D, three polynomials or two polynomials at the image plane. By default, TomoAlign uses this because it's simpler. And now the polynomial parameter have to be determined how with the nonlinear least square procedure I described before. And here we come with a major disadvantage of the method, the high number of parameters involved. We have two polynomials per tilt and 6 or 10 parameters each, which is a huge number of parameters, and we will need abundant fiducial to afford the reliable optimization, and this may, in practice, limit the practical applicability of the method. So we try to develop new alternative ways, and now I will describe it in the next one, which is, this is the rationale. The residuals from the standard alignment may provide estimates of the sample motion with respect to the average sample state reflected in the tomogram. So the standard alignment provides a tomogram, and this tomogram reflects an average state of the sample during the tilt series acquisition. If we pay attention to the residuals, let's focus on here. For a given fiducial, this is the residual, and the origin of the error represents, let's say, the expected position according to the standard alignment, and the arrowhead represents the experimental fiducial position. So we could interpret this type of plots as I describe now. In the acquisition of the image, of this image, if we put this residual in the proper fiducial, in the acquisition of this image, this part of the sample has moved this amount. In the acquisition of this image, this part, if we put this residual here in the proper fiducial, this part of the sample has moved this size. So in summary, what I'm trying to mean is that the residual can give us an estimate of the motion observed at the image plane, and we have these estimates at a scattered position of the 3D space of the tomogram. And we have all of these for every image in the tilt series. But if we want to take into account the motion for the tomographic reconstruction, we cannot deal with scattered position. We need a smooth, continuous model of the motion. How can we, if we apply scattered data interpolation techniques, we can go from here to here and obtain in green a smooth, continuous sample motion model that now can be used in the next step in the tomographic reconstruction program. For illustration purposes, here I show the interpolation step in 2D, but the program works directly in 3D. These two panels represent the same information from different points of view. In red here, we have the residuals that we have obtained at the image at 0 degree of one thick sample. And then when we apply scattered data interpolation, we obtain a smooth, continuous vector field, as shown here in green, that represents the sample motion estimated for every single point in the tomogram. For illustration purposes, here only the vector field at a grid is shown, but the vector field is continuous. There are many scattered data interpolation techniques, but here we use thin plate splines because they are very smooth and the determination of the coefficient is very easy by just simply solving a system of linear equations. And this is the shape of the form of the interpolants. And so we have two interpolants per tilt and with a number of coefficients each, but they are very easy to determine. So now we can go back to TomoAlign and see how can model the sample motion either with polynomials or splines. Previously, I showed you how we can reproduce the alignment with IMOD, the tilt angles from IMOD, the fiducial from IMOD after transforming, and this is the output. If we want to model the sample motion with polynomials, we just can have to use -t, thin or thick, depending on the thickness of the sample. And if we want to use splines, we have to add the flag -s. And -t, thin or thick, allows us automatic configuration internally in TomoAlign, depending on the thickness. If the sample is thin, let's say 100-150 nanometers, this option activates bivariate polynomials or splines, otherwise trivariate. Okay, so if we run these commands, we obtain on console or in a log file a report of the optimization process, the residual mean with the standard alignment, and how it has been reduced with the motion consideration. So normally with motion we have decreased residual, indicating better alignment. Another information that can be obtained, is the residual for the different images individually. Yeah, and this would allow us to plot, to make this type of plots. This is the residual as a function of the image. Here we have two examples: proteasome, purified proteasomes, 15 nanometers thick, embedded in an ice layer of, let's say, less than 100 nanometers, and central or basal bodies, 300 nanometers thick. In red, we have the residual as a function of the image from the standard alignment. And we can see that in any case, thin or thick sample, at the beginning of the acquisition, the residual is much higher, and then progressively decreases and reaches a plateau, let's say. And this happens regardless of the sample, which indicates that the sample moves much more at the beginning of the acquisition and then progressively relaxes. And when we use motion correction or motion consideration in the alignment, we can see that the residual is substantially reduced. And here we have an interesting point, because for thin samples, we can see that either bivariate or travariate polynomials, there is little differences between them, indicating that the variation of the motion from top to bottom is very little and can be ignored. However, in a thick sample, we can see that the substantial reduction of the residual only takes place with the black curve, which represents the trivariate polynomials, indicating that for a thick sample, there might be significant variation of the motion from top to bottom of the sample. Okay, so now to illustrate another type of information that can provide TomoAlign, let's focus on the motion that has been estimated to reduce the residual from around 4 pixels to around 1 pixel in one of the tilt series at the first acquired images, which in this case is at 0 degrees. This represents the tomogram. This is the top part, the middle part, the bottom part. Here we can see the two basal bodies. These spheres represent the gold particles used in the alignment, and here we will see how the motion is changing. Once again, come on. We can see that the motion changes not only magnitude but also in direction. We have seen that at the top the direction is in one direction, while in the bottom is in the other direction. And this is our interpretation. Perhaps what we are seeing here is the effect of the zooming in this area. Okay, so now we have the sample motion model. We have a continuous and smooth model of the sample. Now we can try to correct for it during or simultaneously with the tomographic reconstruction. So here the program is TomoRec. In TomoRec is a program that implements a standard tomographic reconstruction program, but here we use the new the extended projection model. We have using the sample motion model, and this allows us to go to a more accurate for every single voxel in the tomogram. This component allows us to go to a more precise and most accurate position in any image of the TIL series to get hopefully a more exact value to get back projected into the voxel. So it's a standard tomographic reconstruction program, but here we are introducing the sample motion. TomoRec is very simple to use. TomoRec, then the alignment parameters coming from TomoAlign, the TIL series used for the reconstruction, and the output tomogram, and we have to indicate the thickness of the tomogram. There are additional options to tune the parallel computing, multi-core implementation, and to play with different filters for the reconstruction, round filtering, or even some circle-like filter. Okay, so now let's see some examples. These are slices from a standard tomogram, from a standard alignment. Here, purified proteasome, purified ribosomes, basal body, two examples of thin samples, one thick sample. There are some gold particles here, and now let's switch to with motion correction. It's original with motion, original with motion. We can see improvement around the gold particles, but also in the biological structures. Original, new. Proteasomes, ribosomes, and also in the microtubules from the basal bodies. Okay. So now let's move to another way to compensate the motion. This type is only valid for thin sample, thin enough to ignore the variation of the motion in the direction of the electron beam. If the sample is thin enough and we can ignore this variation, we can address the problem like this. We can have the residuals, we can obtain a smooth, continuous model in green, and now if the variation of the motion in the electron beam can be ignored or is the same is the same, we can compensate the motion directly by deforming the image. Imagine, let's assume that the origin of the arrow represents where the fiducial is projected according to the projection model, and the arrowhead represents the experimental one. If we want to compensate this size, we only need to move the pixel from here to here. So if we apply warping, if we apply deforming, we are correcting every image, and we are constructing, or we are producing a pseudo perfectly aligned TIL series amenable to a standard tomography reconstruction program like Tomo 3D or TILT within iMod. The program to do that is TomoAlign. Internally, it takes the standard alignment from iMod and computes the sample motion model and warp the images of the TIL series, and the result can be fed to a standard tomography reconstruction program. TomoAlign has been implemented trying to use iMod procedures, and here we used a different approach to scatter data interpolation. In iMod, there is a library from routines from Pavel Sakov based on natural neighbor interpolation, which is another type of scatter data interpolation technique, but essentially it should be similar to splines, as I mentioned before. And to run TomoAlign, this is the command just to run TomoAlign, and we have to add align.com and newstart.com coming from iMod, and internally TomoAlign takes all the parameters it needs and produces from the original stack produces the warped align TIL series. Let's see an example. These are the first acquired image from the align TIL series with iMod, ribosomes and proteasome. And now let's see the effect of the warping. You see, the effect is more significant at the near the edges of the images. Original, warp, original, warped, original, warped. Now, this warped TIL series hopefully have some motion compensated, so we hopefully will have better tomograms. Let's see. These are the tomogram from the original aligned TIL series. We can see this is ribosomes, proteasome. We can see artifacts around the warp particles, and if we use the warp aligned TIL series, the warp particles look better, but also the biological feature ribosomes and proteasome look better. So for thin samples, this strategy may be useful as well. So as a summary of TomoAlign, it uses starts from the standard alignment where the sample is assumed to be still or intact during acquisition, and then it models the sample motion, and the model is used to compensate the motion during or simultaneously with the tomography reconstruction program, with tomography reconstruction procedure, or the motion correction is applied at the image level by warping, and which enables us to use a standard tomographic reconstruction program. We have seen that this TIL series alignment with motion compensation reduces the alignment residual. The alignment is better, improves the quality of tomogram, and hopefully it helps to increase the resolution in system averaging. To show an example of this, in the next slide, I show the results we obtained with system averaging from the proteasome datasets. Nearly 4,000 tomograms were subjected to system averaging, and with the standard TIL series alignment, we obtained around 12 Armstrong resolution, and with motion correction, either with polynomials or interpolation splines, we observe an improvement of around 3 Armstrong from 12 to 9. We also carry out the warping approach, and we also observe an improvement, but since this approach is like an approximation, the improvement is not so high, but still it's very able. It may be useful, particularly because this approach is very simple, is very fast. So to end up, just some recommendations. If you are going to use TomoAlign, If you are dealing with thin samples, the first approach I recommend is to use the warping approach. This is the simplest and the fastest approach. But if you want to squeeze the data a bit more, you should consider, this is the warping approach, you should consider to use the full consideration of motion. If you are dealing with thick sample, let's say thicker than 150 or 200 nanometers, you need to go to full consideration of motion. Another decision at some point you need to do is how to model the sample motion, with polynomials or splines. My recommendation is go directly to splines. They provide a smoother solution. We have our experience is that they provide similar performance to polynomials if you have abundant fiducial, but in the cases where there are few fiducial, which is not a rare case, the splines provides better solution than polynomials. Polynomials in this case are susceptible to overfitting problems. And finally, limitation. This TomoAlign has the limitation that requires fiducial markers. Not all samples are amenable to gold fiducial markers. The good news is the method is still applicable with virtual markers, using biological features as virtual markers. For instance, patch tracking, which is nicely implemented in iMod. For instance, if you have thin lamellas imaged with Volta faceplates, patch tracking usually or may work well, and you could still apply TomoAlign. And finally, one important limitation is that the distribution of the markers matters. And this is especially important for thick samples. If you want to model the motion in case of thick sample, you need to have enough fiducial and very well distributed in set so that you can get a reliable estimation of the motion in the 3D. And finally, in TomoAlign, there are some advanced topics that I skipped today, but there are some detailed description in the manual, such as cross-validation text to assessment of the alignment, or how to deal with the different methods to CTF correction, or for instance, how to extract software series with motion compensation from the coordinates associated to soft tomograms. Just to end up, I would like to mention that TomoAlign is expected to complement or serve as a complement to other existing methods that are in the field. Some of them are very well established, for instance, local alignment in iMod or TXBR, that originally were developed for electron tomography of plastic section, but they are applicable and useful here as well. And there are another family of emerging programs, very powerful, such as EM Clarity, Warp, or Flexo, that will be very useful to deal with this problem. And somehow, all of them, including TomoAlign, are inspired of in the methods originally developed and including in the local alignment in iMod and TXBR. And that's all. And thank you very much for your attention and for your invitation to give this talk.
Great. Thank you very much. If anyone has questions, you can send them to me by chat. You can send them here, or I can also unmute you. Just send me a message, and I can unmute you. And you can ask it directly if you have a microphone. The sort of 12 angstrom to 9 angstrom resolution gain is pretty impressive. I think you can see like obvious improvements there, like right off the bat. I think I had one just very general question. As you get these high quality models of the sort of vector fields of motion distribution along with different samples and in different, do you have any generalizable conclusions from what you see there around, like, certain types of collection geometries or different microscopes, or
Um,
are there things that you can use to kind of build better models?
no, no. I've tried to get some general idea if some type of motion was reproducible or were characteristic of a given geometry of given areas, but I didn't find anything anything consistent. For instance, at the beginning, I thought that perhaps the motion was higher and the vector fields were larger in areas near the foil, because it's known that the foil deforms during electron irradiation. But in some cases I saw that, but in others not. So I didn't find anything consistent to be claimed.
Yeah, great. Well, with that, we can wrap it up. Jose, thank you very much. Thank you for joining today. We have the 2019. I think January 2019 is the latest version of TomoAlign, if I'm right. But if not, we'll get the latest version in there if you need it. Just drop us an email and we can make that happen for you. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much to you, and
Great.
thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.